Hi Clarinet and Alto saxophone players, it's Miss Ramsey here. So I'm making a video for you, and the goal of this video is for you to watch this before your first band class. So you want to watch this before because we're going to be learning how to put your reeds on. And I want you to watch this video in its entirety. So you should have your clarinet case in front of you and watch all of this at the same time. We want to make sure you are going to be doing this along with me in a second. So we're going to talk about alto saxophone and clarinet mouthpieces. They are similar in a lot of ways. There's some slight differences in the markings, so we'll get to those, but a lot of times I might just be holding one. It'll apply to both instruments. So the first thing with your mouthpiece, so here's our mouthpiece. On your mouthpiece, most of you are going to find a mouthpiece patch. That's going to help cushion your teeth a little bit. And then this is called the ligature, and this is what holds your reed on. So when you get your ligature might look like this, and what we need to do is we need to unscrew our ligature a little bit, make it a little bit looser, so it goes below those two silver lines. So why don't you grab your ligature right now, and if you need to pause this you can, and you're just to lightly unscrew it. Do not unscrew it so much that the screws come out. You just need to turn it so it's just going to be right below those lines. And if you've accidentally taken your ligature off your mouthpiece, your ligature has two ends. One is a little bit thinner, one's a little bit fatter. We put the fatter end first, and if you have that blue dot on your ligature, that bottom, that's going to line up with that. So if I did it the other way, it would be on the wrong side and the blue wouldn't be lining up. So we're doing it that way. We have the blue dot on the bottom screw of our ligature, should match there. So we've loosened it enough that we are below those two lines. Good. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to carefully put that down. Your mouthpiece can chip really easily, so we want to be really careful with it. If I were to drop this on the floor of the band room, most likely it would chip, and there's no way to fix it. You just have to throw it away and get a new mouthpiece, buy a new mouthpiece. So we want to be really careful. So we're going to very carefully, you're going to put this back in your case. So now that you've got your ligature in the right spot, and you're going to grab your reed, and you're going to be taking your reed out of a reed case. This is your reed case. This is what you're going to be storing your reed in. And this is what protects your reed, because your reed is super thin. You can see the light coming through at the top of it. And what we do with our reed is we're going to get our entire reed wet. So go ahead, grab your reed. If you need to pause this, that's fine. Grab your reed, grab it out of you're going to take it out of its case. All right, and we're going to get our reed wet. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to put it in our mouth. We're not going to put the whole thing in now. And we're going to suck on it like it's a lollipop. You want to get a lot of saliva on it. We're going to turn it over. You're going to now do the back side, so be very careful with this thin end. Your entire reed needs to be wet. If any of it is dry, it will not vibrate and your instrument won't play. Make sure it's nice and wet. Okay, so what we're going to do with our reed, we've been really careful. We're going to carefully, with our reed in our hand, we're going to grab our mouthpiece. So you've got your mouthpiece. And I'm holding a saxophone mouthpiece, so clarinet players, if you're like, mine has cork on the bottom, it's because yours does. I'll eventually show a clarinet mouthpiece too, but you guys do this the same way. So what you're going to do is you're going to be taking the fatter end of your reed. So your reed has a side that's completely shaved, and then it has a side that has like a shinier part. And you can see on mine, there's different colors. This is just the different parts of the cane, just like a tree bark's different. It's the same thing on your reed. So if you have something dark right here, don't stress about that. That's just how the wood for the cane was. So make sure it's wet. It dries out pretty quickly. So we're gonna take the bottom part, and the flat side of the reed is gonna go against the flat part of your mouthpiece. And so my ligature, I had loosened so it's below. So I'm actually gonna lift my ligature up a little bit, and I'm gonna slide the flat part in. I'm not putting it in this hole. It doesn't go in there. I'm putting it in between the mouthpiece and the ligature. So it's going to slide in just like that. So why don't you try that? So we're just going to get that, slide that in. And once it's in, you are going to try to line up the top of the reed with the top of your mouthpiece. And again, the top of your reed is very fragile. You don't want to avoid touching it. And you should have a sliver of black that looks like that right on the center. Do you guys see that sliver of black? It's just barely. If I go down too far, there's that big gap, you won't be able to play. If it's up too high, even see how much, that's not even that much high. You can see through the reed at the top. So we want just barely a sliver. That's probably too much. Just a sliver of black. So you're gonna make yours look like that. Double check that's right. Then you're gonna take your ligature and you're gonna still make sure, I'm gonna adjust this, it's a little bit hard to do on camera. Make sure it's still below those silver lines. See how it's still below? And then you wanna make sure the ligature is right in the center of your reed. And then on your saxophone, there's a silver line to show you where that center spot is. And on your clarinet, let me grab, this is a chipped reed that I'm gonna show you later, but on your clarinet, it's the same idea. It should be right in the center. And on your clarinet, it's actually gonna go right down, and you should be able to see that red dot. So your ligature and that red dot should basically be lining up. Okay, so we've got it right there. So what we're gonna do, make sure we've got our sliver of black still, and then we are gonna tighten the screws on our ligature. Again, make sure it's centered, it's below those lines, and you're gonna tighten that. And you want to tighten it enough that nothing's gonna wiggle around. If your little sister came over to grab your mouthpiece, this wouldn't slide around. So it needs to be tight enough that this is all together. So if I don't tighten it enough and I grab this, this can move. See, that means my ligature is not tight enough. So I'm gonna very carefully make sure it's centered. I've got my sliver of black at the top, and I'm gonna tighten it enough that nothing is gonna move. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, and that means my reed is in the right place. I've got my blue dot on my bottom ligature lined up here. I've got my sliver of black. Okay, it's right in the center of my reed. So I'm gonna do that with my clarinet. So we did the saxophone. So if you wanna practice again, you can very carefully unscrew your ligature, take your reed out, and we're gonna try this again. So what I'm gonna do again, this time I'm gonna show on clarinet. This is good practice for everyone. We wanna practice a lot because we should be able to do this in like less than a minute eventually. That's our goal. So getting my reed wet. I've got my ligature. I unscrewed it enough so it is below the silver lines. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my reed that's completely wet, should be totally saturated, and I am going to put the flat end, ooh, I dropped my reed, be careful. I take the flat end of my reed and I'm gonna slide it in. The reason I'm not going this way is because that's the fragile part of your reed and it'd be really easy to chip. So always do the fat end of our reed goes in first. Get it in wherever you need to and then adjust your ligature. So get the reed in the right spot. Okay, so I've got my sliver of black. You guys see that? Just a sliver. And then I'm gonna pull my ligature down. I'm gonna make sure it's in the center. You can use your fingers along here. There's a little ridge to help center it. You can see my red dots right there for my clarinet. Saxophones, you've got a silver line to tell you it's center. And then I'm gonna tighten my screws so my reed isn't gonna move. And on clarinets, you may have to tighten your ligature more than the altos do. I think on your ligatures you might have. So now it's nice and secure. If I move this, nothing is moving. If it were too loose again, if you go and try to push on it and you can shift that reed back and forth, see how that moves? That means my ligature is not tight enough. So I've got it in the right place and I'm ready to go. Now if it's nice and wet, if you go to play it, you're going ee-oo. See this shape? Ee-oo. This is nice and flat. My chin's nice and flat. Ee-oo. And I'm really just gonna slide this up. I'm not gonna roll this in. Rolling in is bad. Ee-oo. And I'm just gonna put my mouthpiece right there. Ee-oo. My teeth are on top. And I'm gonna blow. I'm not gonna puff my cheeks. And that is the type of sound that we wanna get. And that's gonna take some practice, but our teeth are actually on top. That's how we play the clarinet. And our entire mouth goes around like this. Now, some things that can be problematic. If your reed is too low or too high, you won't get a sound. So if you go to play and you're not getting a sound, check that. If your reed is dry anywhere, doesn't mean just the place where you put your mouth is, any part of your reed is dry, it also may not get a sound. So this reed, how wet it is and where it's placed is really important. Another thing that's important is a chipped reed. See this reed? This is a chipped reed. And a chipped reed is problematic. It won't play. So if you have even just a tiny little corner chipped, that reed should just go right in the trash. So we want to be really careful with our reeds. When we're not using our reeds, we want to put them back in the case. And we put the thin end, the really thin end goes first. And this case helps keep it dry. It helps dry it out and helps keep it flat when it dries. I'm going to show you on this reed. Do you see that little black dot in the back? That's actually mold. That is from a student's clarinet that left their reed on their mouthpiece. And I've seen some where you get mold. So you want to make sure every time you're done playing, do not leave your reed on your mouthpiece. Take it out, and put it in the case, except if it's chipped, and then you want to throw it away. So that is how you put your reed and your mouthpiece on. I want you guys to practice that so you're really good at putting it together. So when we have our first class on next week, we are going to be doing this. This is the very first thing we do, and we're going to probably spend the entire class playing on this in our barrel. So that's going to be really important we get good at that. So your reed needs to be wet, completely wet. You need to make sure your ligature is below your screws. You need to make sure that it is lined up in the center and that you have just a sliver, tiniest sliver of black at the top. And that's how you do it, guys. All right, happy putting your reeds on. Please make sure you practice this before our first class. Bye, guys.